Hi, my name's Gareth and I make videos helping people to get higher scores in the IELTS test. In this video, we're going to be looking at part 2 of the IELTS speaking test. In fact, we're going to be looking at a sample answer, and it's the one we planned in the previous video. So if you haven't seen the planning video, it might be useful to see that before you watch the full sample answer. But of course, this is what we're going to look at in the video, the sample answer for this part 2 task card. Now you can see it's asking us to describe something we did that was new or exciting, and we have those 4 cues: what you did, where and when you did this, who you shared the activity with, and explain why this activity was new or exciting for you. Now, of course, we're going to go through those cues in the order in the sample answer, and we're going to follow that plan we did in the previous video. We're going to use those ideas and the vocabulary that we talked about, and we're going to try to expand on all of those ideas as much as we can before we move on to the next point. Now, what I'll do is if I read the answer out to you, and you can listen and try and notice some of the useful things about the answer, some of the good vocabulary and the way that I'm using kind of different sentence structures to explain my ideas. And of course, afterwards, I'll give an analysis of the answer and point out some of the really useful things that you should try to notice when we're giving the answer. And of course, you can probably remember, if you did watch the last video, that we were choosing the activity of rock climbing. So this whole answer will focus on that one activity and the time that I tried it. So let's have a look at the full answer. Here we go. I'm going to tell you about an exhilarating activity I tried doing a while ago. It was rock climbing, and as I live in a city, it wasn't on real rock walls outside. I had to do it inside on artificial rock walls, but it was still pretty hair-raising. I've never been very good with height, so the whole experience made me quite nervous. I went to a climbing centre sometime last year to see what it was like. It was a huge place with walls which had varying degrees of difficulty. The walls were situated around the edges of a large room with a very high ceiling. And in the middle of the room, there was an interesting structure that you could climb on without ropes. I was told this is called bouldering. The staff there were really friendly and welcoming. I was made to feel as comfortable as I could have been, considering how unfamiliar I was with rock climbing. A close friend of me took me. He's a member of the climbing centre. He's quite experienced when it comes to climbing, so he was a good person to show me the ropes, quite literally. We had a really good time, and I was keen to try it again after we left. Climbing the walls was a real challenge for me. Slowly making my way up, trying to work out the best route to the top wasn't easy. Once I had reached the top, it felt like a dizzying height, but I soon got used to it. It required a lot of flexibility and strength. To reach the grips on the wall and pull myself up with different parts of my body, I had to stretch myself to my limit. By the end of the session, I felt exhausted, and I realized the amount of endurance needed to be good at rock climbing. There we have it. So that's the full answer there. Probably around 2 minutes, right? I've got enough there to fill the time that the examiner gives to speak in this part of the test. And hopefully you would have noticed that we did go through those cues in the order of the cue card, fully expanding on those ideas before we moved on to the next one. And of course, if you do remember the planning video that we made for this, then you would have noticed that we did use the ideas from that video, and we used the vocabulary that we had for those ideas as well. We also added lots of extra stuff in there and some nice vocabulary that I can kind of point out to you and explain why it would be seen as kind of high-level vocabulary that's going to help us to get a really high band score. In fact, this kind of answer would achieve probably a band 9 in the test. But of course, there are parts 1 and part 3 that you would have to do well in as well to get this kind of very, very high band score. They're not giving you a score just for one part of the speaking test. So I'll tell you what, let's just have a quick look at each of those kind of paragraphs that we made for each of the cues. And the first one was kind of introducing the idea of the activity and what I did. So if we have a look here, you can see there's kind of in the first sentence, there's a nice adjective there, which is kind of a synonym of exciting. We've got the word exhilarating, so very exciting. So they're a nice adjective. Remember, in this part of the test, you want to show off your knowledge of different adjectives and your range of vocabulary. Remember, this will put your lexical resource score up very high. And then I go on to explain the activity a bit more. The fact that it was indoors, not outdoors, and we did it on artificial rock walls. And again, that was one of the bits of vocabulary that I wanted to include when we were doing the planning. I've also used another adjective there to describe the activity. You can see it here, it might be new to you, this word hair-raising. Now, hair-raising, again, is a nice adjective to describe something that is very exciting, even a little bit scary. And of course, I've explained afterwards in the next sentence that I'm not very good with heights. Now, this just means you're a bit scared of being high up and looking down to the ground. So of course, it made me quite nervous. So here we can see lots of kind of variety with adjectives to describe the activity, describe my feeling as well. Then we fully covered that first point, what you did. Then we got to move on to where and when you did it. So straight away, we in the next paragraph, we're focusing on that, right? We're talking about the climbing center that we went to, and it was last year. Then we're going into more detail, describing the place. Again, more adjectives, the word huge there, right? Not just big, but huge. And also we're describing the walls in the place, which had varying degrees of difficulty, meaning some were easier and some were a bit more difficult. And of course, we're describing what it looks like around the outside, around the edge of the room. There were all of these walls and there was a very high ceiling. And of course, I'm describing something in the middle of the room as well, where you could climb without ropes. And what they told me, there was some specific topic related vocabulary there, the word bouldering. It's this thing that we can do, climbing without ropes there. And I described the staff. Remember, I did think about this before where we were in the planning talking about the word friendly. I've also used the word welcoming there as well. And I've also explained at the end, they made me feel quite comfortable, or as comfortable as I could have been, right? Considering the situation. So a nice full explanation there of where it was and a little bit about when I did it as well. And then of course I'm moving on to talking about the person I did the activity with, and that was the close friend. Remember, that was the idea. We don't go into much detail here, but we're describing him a bit. He was a member, or he is a member of the climbing center. He's quite experienced when it comes to climbing. This is a nice idiomatic phrase here, when it comes to something. It means he is kind of experienced in this activity. So I've explained afterwards, he's a good person to show me the ropes. Now, this is nice idiomatic language here, to show someone the ropes. Now, in the idiomatic sense, this means to kind of explain to someone and teach someone how to kind of do the basics of something, right? If you're explaining a skill or showing someone a skill for the first time, you're showing them the ropes. Now also this works in the literal sense because to climb you need ropes. The type of climbing I was doing on the walls involved ropes. So quite literally, really, he was showing me the ropes as well. So we've kind of got the separate meanings of that, and I make it clear by saying the phrase quite literally. So after we've explained a bit about that person I did it with, we move on to the final point, and that was why the activity was new or exciting. And you'll notice here, we've got quite a big paragraph, and we're explaining the fact that it was a challenge. Remember, that was the idea that we had. It was a challenge, or it was challenging as well, if we're going to use the adjective. And we just explain it a bit. Slowly making my way up, of course, up the walls to work out the best route. And I said, to the top wasn't easy. And of course, I've used a bit of a nice idiomatic phrase here to describe the feeling I had. Or the feeling I had about the height of the wall. And I've described it as a dizzying height. Now, this means, well, it makes you feel dizzy, a bit unsteady, right? But I said I soon got used to it. So I soon felt quite comfortable with it, and it wasn't a bad feeling being at the top of the wall. Also, I've used these words that we talked about. Remember, flexibility, strength, and endurance. You'll notice in these final couple of sentences, I'm using those words and explaining them a bit. It required a lot of flexibility and strength. And then I explained it a bit. To reach the grips on the wall, I had to pull myself up with different parts of my body. And I had to stretch myself to my limit. So these things are involving kind of your flexibility to stretch your body into these positions. And of course, pulling yourself up requires a lot of strength. And then finally, I end by saying I felt exhausted, very, very tired. More adjectives there. You see these tasks, they involve, if you're going to describe something very well, a lot of adjectives. And then again, finally, I say I realized the amount of endurance. There we go, that key word that I wanted to include. I realized the amount of endurance needed to be good at rock climbing. So there we go, a nice full explanation there and description of this activity and the time that I did it in the past. You'll see a lot of use of past tenses there because it was something I did in the past. But of course, at times I'm using the present tenses as well. So we're mixing up the grammar there a little bit and using different verb tenses. So again, it's showing off this quite high level of English. And of course, there are no errors in the answer at all. So hopefully that idea there and the way I explained it is quite helpful. And you could adapt some of those ideas to your own activity that was new or exciting for you. One of the things you've got to notice here is that it's fully going through each point and using those notes that we made in the planning video for this task. We're making sure it's a nice full and clear answer that's focused on the topic card and not really losing focus at all at any point during the answer. So why don't you give this topic card a try? Try making your own notes when you're planning, following the kind of technique we talked about in the previous video, and then try giving your own answer and see if you can get something similar. You could even record yourself and transcribe your answer. Write it down. See if it looks anything like the answer that we've looked at here today. But there we go. Hopefully that was useful. And if it was, don't forget to give the video a like. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on similar videos in the future. So there we go. See you again in the next video.